Hi, I'm Al Chronister. I'm a former construction supervisor and board member for Habitat for Humanity. Welcome to Habitat for Humanity. My role back in the day in 1986, I was a construction supervisor, volunteer. And at that point, I got on the board of directors in about 1988. In 89, I was the board president for a couple of years. And so I had served in different capacities throughout the 90s. So I was a fireman, but I built on my days off. We have an unusual schedule. And I kind of got tired of it when I was watching the news one night, and Habitat came on the news and they were recruiting volunteers. And I said, I can do that. And so the next day I called them and went down and talked to them and went to lunch with the executive director down there and decided this was something I wanted to do. I remember talking with the Baumanns, who Fred and Pam that started it, that they had to jump through a lot of hoops to get a franchise basically here in Yakima. And their goal was to build a home in Buena, because that's where they lived and farmed. It was mostly farmers that were on the board. And I worked quite closely with Ted Layler, who was their construction supervisor. He was the only paid person on the job, and I think he got $500 a month, something like that back then. And we didn't have any accounts anywhere. When we went somewhere, like McGuire's Lumber to buy lumber, we had to write a check. And so that was an interesting way to do things, and it went well. But those people had such a love for people and a love for our Lord that they just dove in head first. It started in '84, and I just came really in about '86, '87, and but we got a lot more people from our church involved later on in the process. So one of the first things our church did was in 1991, we did a church build of an entire house. We funded it, we built it, we took the family in, and we actually had committees that took care of things like neighborhood, environmental issues. We had family committee that took care of some of the family's needs and answered their questions. We had buildings committee, we had a prayer committee, an outreach committee, and we had 153 people from what was then Westminster that participated in that house build. And we did every bit of it from beginning to end. And so from that, a lot of people remained with Habitat, and until this day still work with Habitat. We built the house for the Magana family, which mom, dad, and two little boys that were age 1 and 5 at the time. We actually got to meet the boys later on, about 3 or 4 years ago in the church. And they came back, and Luis Magana, the older boy, he went to college, got his degree, and he was also a licensed pastor. And he preached at our church about 4 years ago. And one of the things that really impacted his life was the fact that all these people from this church identified with his family and took them in and showed them the love that God would love all of us. And he stood there and told all of us that he became a Christian because of the people at this church. And it was, sometimes you don't get to see the outcome of your presence or your words and things, and so it was a real gift to be able to hear and see. The volunteers are a critical piece in order to put the puzzle together and do the work, and obviously it keeps the costs down tremendously on the overall cost of the project. For example, the house that the church built, every dime was supported that house by the church, but yet every hour that put into that house was done by church people. But also it got people to recognize that, hey, those folks that are getting these families, which they had to put 500 hours in themselves, these folks are wonderful people. And I think most of our volunteers walked away from projects thinking they got more out of the project than maybe even the family did. And I think that was a huge, huge thing for volunteers on that.